Hey, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Willpower Podcast. I'm very excited to announce that I have a special guest on today. Her name is Jess Lopez. Hi, Jess. How you doing today?
Good. How are you? Thanks for having me.
Of course. So, Jess, before we get started, thought I'd just ask what's your story, that kind of thing.
Sure. So my name's Jess Lopez, and I'm a certified professional recovery coach. And I'm currently working on getting certified as a somatic trauma coach and a positive psychology practitioner. So basically all those fancy words for working with people with addiction and trauma. I have about 24 years sober and clean from alcohol. And I live
Congratulations.
Thank you. I live in the Pacific Northwest. I have 9-year-old twins, and been with my husband for about 24 years. So just around when I got sober, actually, he helped me get sober. And yeah, that's a little bit about me. I started my own business a little over a year ago called My Sober Sunrise, and I do one-to-one client coaching. And then I also host meetings over at Sober Motivation platform there too. So,
Yeah.
and yeah.
Yeah, so that's where I initially recognized you from, was the Sober Motivation Podcast, because I think my episode was on after yours.
Yes.
So I was going through his catalog before I jumped on his podcast, and I saw yours, and it was inspiring. So I just want to say thank you for sharing your story like that. Yeah.
Thank you.
So Jess, and you mentioned your business there, My Sober Sunrise, right? Isn't that your Instagram handle as well?
Mm-hmm. It is. Yeah.
Okay, great. So if anyone wants to check out Jess after the show, you, feel free to do so there. So Jess, what I like to do is go into people's story of when did they start drinking, or when did it all begin for you as far as the drinking goes.
The first time that I remember trying alcohol, I think I was about 12 years old. And I grew up in a family that my parents both drank every night, like 5 o'clock or 6 o'clock, whenever my dad would get home from work. And then there was alcohol always in our house. And mostly I think it was because, if we had people visiting, we want to make sure that we had the drink that they liked. And not we, I should say my parents. And so my first time trying was actually at my house. My parents had left, I don't know where, not for too long, but, and there was a bottle of vodka, and my couple of my friends and I thought we should try it. And if we drink too much, but it was one of those big, huge, like Costco jug ones,
Yeah.
Because I don't know what we were thinking, but we thought we'll just put water in and make up the difference. It's like ridiculous.
I used to do the same thing. I used to put the water into the bottle and think I can get away with it.
Yeah,
that never worked out. They would always found out, my parents, or my father at least.
Yeah. So that was the first time that I remember doing it.
So it was the first. So this is all the way back in, you were how old? Like 14? How old?
12.
12. That's really young. I was 14. So basically around the same age.
Yeah.
So when you first had your sip of alcohol, was it like for me, it was like an instant, oh my God, this thing is so good. I love the way this feels. Some people kind of grew into it gradually, but I was wondering, what's your story? Did you fall in love with it right away, or?
Oh yeah. I mean, I think, I definitely felt, my friends, I remember sitting there like gagging, right? And they're like, this stuff's so disgusting. And it didn't taste great by any means, but the feeling that I got inside was like, this is what I've, been missing. It was very weird. I think it was a very different reaction than probably a lot of people have. But for myself, it just like everything kind of calmed down in my brain, in my body. I tended to be an anxious child anyways growing up. And so, I noticed right away that I liked it. I liked the feeling.
Yeah. I was the same way. I just really enjoyed the feeling of it. The taste of it was disgusting. I mean, who really likes the taste, especially when you're little, right? I mean, everything, you just want sweet stuff, right?
Yeah.
And then when you try something like alcohol, that feeling is so great, isn't it? The initial one. So you enjoyed the feeling. So walk me through high school.
Yeah. So middle school was kind of like here and there, whatever, I dabble in it a little bit. In high school, I'd say it probably really started picking up my sophomore year. So 10th grade, probably. So sophomore year, it picked up a lot and then just continued to pick up in high school. And sophomore year also coincided in a time when I met my high school sweetheart, which ended up being a very abusive relationship. And so I think combining the two, and then it escalated from there. But, I kind of held two lives. Like I was able to go to school and get good, decent grades and had friends in school, all the things. And then kind of had this other life outside of school where I was
Yeah.
partying, drinking, hanging out with the wrong crowd. So
Yeah.
looking back, I feel like I was living kind of two separate lives.
Did you start to have issues in the younger years? Like, were there issues going on personally? I know you said you had a relationship that was traumatic.
hmm
Was alcohol helping, or was it helping ease that situation that you were in?
I think two things. I think one is that it was readily available with the people that I was hanging out with. A lot of either kids that were unsupervised a lot or older people, guys in their 20s that could go buy the
Yeah.
alcohol. It was readily available. It's what people were doing. And at the time, I didn't see it as a coping mechanism. Obviously, I mean, I was with my high school sweetheart for 5 years. So as the years grew and the abuse got more and more, absolutely, it became crutch for me to not have to deal with things or think I wasn't dealing with things, right? And being able to
Yeah.
just suppress all of the emotions and everything that was going along with it during that time.
Yeah. So you didn't, so it wasn't like a coping strategy or mechanism yet. It was something that you just happened to be doing, and then that was also going on at the same time.
Yeah, I mean, looking back, I think to myself, it was something I said, my mind is always going. And
Mhm.
so one thing that it helps me do is slow down my mind, right?
Okay.
Make me not so anxious, make me feel comfortable when I was maybe socially feeling uncomfortable in situations, right? So
Yeah.
it definitely played a part in easing all of those things. And I didn't see it that way. At the time, I saw it as I'm just doing what everybody else does
hmm
that I was around. Like I didn't foresee it being a problem. I just thought it was a phase
Yeah.
at the time, and I didn't connect, my drinking to anything like emotionally. I knew I felt better. As weird as that sounds, I
hmm
felt better when I was drinking to myself. Obviously not afterwards, but in the moment, I felt it gave me confidence that I didn't have otherwise at the time.
Yeah. Yeah. You and I are alike in that regard. It made me more confident. It totally lowered the anxiety level. It made me more like outgoing and speak with my mind, like be this
hmm
personality that I always had anyways, but it made it really come out to the front of what I was showcasing to the world. Okay, so now you're getting older. When did you start noticing that it was becoming an issue?
It took quite a while. I think it's like a lot of people say where it kind of creeps up. And so like the amount of, let's say, times per week I was drinking, the amount I was drinking each night, things like that, it would like slowly creep up. And I was about 18 or 19 when I started noticing that, wow, my intake, what I could intake and what I did intake was far higher than anybody else around me. Like,
hmm
if I'm drinking, I can drink, I didn't drink beer as much, but let's just say if I had a beer, I could drink it and I look over and everybody else is halfway through there. So like my intake was a lot faster, a lot more. And what is scary about it is that I didn't suffer any real consequences physically for the longest time.
hmm
Like I didn't black out and I would drink a ton of alcohol, or like people would say like, you didn't seem like you had that much at all. Like, so I appeared a lot more sober than I was.
hmm
That seems to run in my family, by the way, where it's like people have no idea how intoxicated you are for whatever reason. I could just, I guess, keep it together or whatever. I don't know what you call it, but it's pretty scary now when I look back on it.
Yeah.
But as There was definitely a
Yeah,
correlation. Go ahead.
yeah. I was the same. I drank so often and so much that it was almost hard to distinguish when I was intoxicated and when I wasn't. And I would hide it so well. I mean, I was like such a master chameleon when it came to hiding it that, it was hard to distinguish like, okay, he's drunk or he's not, because I wasn't falling down most of the time, right? There was
Hmm.
obviously those occasions that I was totally out of control, but yeah, I can relate to that
Yeah,
on that one. Yeah.
it was. And I think there's definitely a correlation between the increase in the abuse that was happening in the relationship and the increase in drinking. But there was a lot of other things going on too. Like my father was very much a functioning alcoholic, right? So like he held down his job, did all the like check mark boxes that we say in our society means that you're successful, right? He marked all those boxes. And he was someone who drank a lot. I never saw him physically seem intoxicated, right? I never
Hmm.
saw him, pass out from drinking or stumble his words or anything like that. But he drank every night and he drank quite a bit. And that was increasing as well. And he and I had a really rough relationship. And so I had that kind of going on in the background. I was graduating high school. I was going off to college when I wasn't really ready to go off to college. So there was just a lot of things going on at the time. And that was how I could cope, really.
Yeah.
I mean, was drinking.
Yeah, so I mean, a lot going on, and you're using alcohol as like on the side as well, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, and you're young, so like, everyone I feel, I'm speaking for myself, but everyone around me around that age, everyone was getting hammered, everyone was drinking to excess just because it
Yeah.
was fun and it was something to do, and it's just how you socialize. I could probably count on one hand, the people in my close proximity of friendships that didn't drink,
Well,
so
and that's what it was. It was normal, right?
Mhm.
And I didn't see it being not normal. Like I didn't see that, oh, I'm the only one. Everybody was drinking at the time. And I also was like marking, check mark all the boxes because when I graduated high school and I did fairly well, and then that summer, I kept jobs all throughout high school. I would work, I would drink and to excess and get up an hour or two later and go in and work all day. And so for me, I didn't see any red flags. I was going off to college. I was doing all these things I was quote unquote supposed to do.
Mhm.
Everybody else was too.
Right. So it's normal.
Yeah, I didn't at the time. I thought, well, this is just what you do right now.
Yeah.
And
So
later
so
on,
when
it'll change.
yeah. Let's get to that. When did you start realizing, or later on in your life, when did it start becoming an issue? When did you start noticing red flags?
I can remember when we were talking earlier about like how it kind of gave you a voice or like made
Mhm.
you, more outgoing. I was noticing that like I was I was always that fun party girl, and I was turning into a mean drunk sometimes. It was like maybe all the grievances or things that anger, whatever I had that I was holding on to, drinking allowed me to then just let it go and let it out, causing ripples in relationships and, doing and saying things that I wasn't proud of. And I had run-ins, like I'd been pulled over many times. I was never something I'm not proud of, but I was never arrested. Like I didn't feel like I really got the consequences that probably I should have.
Mhm.
And I knew somewhere in the back of my mind that time was running out. Like eventually this is going to hit you hard. And then I tried the moderation thing, right? Like, cause now I was becoming kind of like a liability instead of fun. And
Yeah.
so, I had a couple of friends who were like, hey, you really shouldn't drink that much. You need to watch. Hey, we're going to go to this party, and you should really watch how much you drink so that you don't make a fool of yourself or whatever.
So
And
yeah, so you had people actually looking out on your behalf, saying like, maybe you shouldn't drink so much sometimes.
a couple, yeah, it was like I was switching kind of friend groups at the time. So it was
Mhm.
like this weird thing. And I tried, I was like, okay, I'll just have beer. I don't like beer. I'll have two beers. Or like, hey, after my second drink, don't let me have another drink. I tried all these things. It never worked. And finally, I was 19, going on 20, and I was living life the way I had been. And I woke up, it was getting increasingly worse. I just should say that. I was like starting to get sick a lot, like vomiting and things like that, and things that hadn't occurred before. But the tipping point for me was waking up at a same friend's house that we would always go party at. And the following morning I woke up and I was like, oh, I got to go to work. And I was shaking, like could not control it. And I thought, what the heck? What is this? And somebody that was my so-called friend was like, hey, if you take a shot, those
Hair of
shakes
the
will go
dog.
away and you'll feel fine.
Mhm.
So I was like, okay, because I got to go do stuff. So I did, and it worked. And it scared me to death.
Yeah.
I think that was the first moment that I thought, oh, I've got a problem.
Yeah, that's so common. That was my all through college, all in like the 5, 7 years after college. We would drink so much that that next morning was so brutal. We'd start getting the shakes a little bit, and we would laugh about it, like as if it was a joke. Like, oh, I'm getting the shakes. Why don't we have a Bloody Mary to kind of start the day off on the right foot? Which is, what are we
Yeah.
doing, right? Like,
Yeah.
what is going on? Like, we're already showing signs of withdrawal from alcohol, and we're 21 years old, 22 at the time. So yeah, I'm with you on that one. So so you started noticing withdrawal symptoms? What happened after that?
After that, I just knew like I had to stop. And everything was kind of crashing down at once. I needed to get out of the relationship that I was in, and I knew that. I knew I needed to quit drinking. I didn't know how. I kept all of this from my family and even some of my friends, like that were off at college, because I had gone to college and dropped out and come home. And so they weren't there seeing me on a daily basis. And, they didn't know how bad it was. And my parents had no idea. So I had to do it on my own. And I took it upon myself to change the trajectory. I don't know how other way to put it other than I was just so scared that I just decided at that point, I was like, listen, you need to get out of this relationship before you die. Like it's escalated severely. And that was a really hard truth to swallow. And I really believed that. And I knew also that I had an aunt that was an alcoholic at the time. And I was like, that's going to be me if I don't do something. And I had to make the decision. And it was a really like, draw the line in the sand that you at 20 years old, before it's even legal to drink, are going to sit at home on every weekend and be bored. It's better to be bored by yourself and sober than to be out doing those things. And that's what I did.
Wow. So you made the decision you knew there was a issue, and you were smart enough to catch it at 20, 21 almost?
20.
Wow, 20. So you literally put yourself in a room and barricaded yourself from the world to make sure that you wouldn't become that person.
Yeah, literally. I mean, I remember just kept telling myself it's better to be bored. And I would spend my Fridays, my Saturday nights, every night. I was living back with my parents, and I
Yeah.
had the third floor, like it was kind of like a master suite, and they were nice enough to let me have that. And I literally just cocooned myself for months and literally got away from everybody, for lack of better words, disappeared. I mean, I'm
Yeah.
sure if you asked, they're like, I don't even know what happened to her. She just disappeared. And yeah, that's what I did. I didn't know anything else to do. It was very instinctual, I felt like. And I didn't, I had gone to like an Al-Anon meeting for my dad, ironically enough, and
Mhm.
with my mom. And I could totally relate to that. But I didn't think to go to like an AA. And back then, even, I mean, 24 years ago, there wasn't the availability I feel like there is now, or even the recognition of the problem, especially someone that young. If I would have
Mhm.
gotten caught, by the law or done, gone a different route, maybe, but as where I was, I didn't feel like I had any options. That's all I
Yeah.
knew how to do, was to just literally sit on my hands and be by myself.
Wow. So when you decided to put yourself into a cocoon like that, in like a sober cocoon, which is so smart. I mean, I wish I did that. I wish more people do that. What were you doing to fill your time? I mean, if you think about it, right, your life was so different, and it went from being, using alcohol to the excess that you were, and trying to moderate, which was great. You're trying to moderate your drinking. Most people don't. Like, I didn't do that. Um, what were you doing? Like, how were you feeling your time from this life that you were living before to now when you're just kind of barricading yourself sober?
So I was going to college locally at the time. So I had re-enrolled back in school. So I had that going on. But I was in the middle of court cases with my ex, for things that he had done to me. And so it was a really trying time. All of that stuff was going on. But I was going to college and I remember sleeping a lot in the beginning.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember just sleeping. And my
Hmm.
mom asked me, like, what's wrong with you? Are you okay? I'm like, yeah, just tired. And spending a lot of time being bored,
Hmm.
honestly. I was almost afraid to go back out into the world. I didn't trust myself at the time. I didn't trust that I would stay sober. On top of, being scared that I had a restraining order at the time from my ex that he would see me. So there's like a multiple layers of things that kind of propelled me to go into hiding per se. But
Yeah.
I just didn't trust myself at the time to be out in the world until I either had community to help or, had somehow, I didn't know when I was going to have that moment where I guess I thought it would be okay. But at the time, I just knew I was not prepared to be out and about with everybody.
Yeah. So when did you start trusting yourself to get back out there in the world?
So, yeah. So everything kind of happened really fast. And when I decided to quit, it was shortly thereafter that I met my now husband at school. And ironically enough, I actually the first time I met him, I was like wasted, which is like horrible. But I knew that I couldn't drink anymore. And it was really weird. Like I met him and he was 25 at the time and going to college where I was going, living with a buddy. And, they had a closet full of booze. Right. And
Hmm.
I remember saying to him, like, I can't drink anymore. I just can't do it. I just call him,
How did he take it?
this is so weird. I call him like my guardian angel because he said to his buddy, he's like, hey, and this was in very quick amount of time. He's like, we got to take the alcohol out of the house, man, for a while.
Wow.
And
That's really cool.
yeah. And his best friend who's still in our lives, he's like, I remember that day. I thought, well, he's not kidding. He's going to marry you
Yeah.
because he's, he's saying to get this stuff out. And he was just very supportive about it.
Hmm.
And I needed that. So we spent a lot of time together, obviously getting to know each other in the very beginning and immediately fell in love. And for my 21st birthday, he's like, well, what do you want to do? Because we're not gonna go to the club. We're not going to drink. And so he took me to like a poetry slam contest in downtown and it was awesome. Um,
Yeah.
and so I really think that he didn't know at the time how much he was helping save my life. And I didn't know at the time how much I needed that. So it was kind of this like, whatever you believe in, the world, the universe, divine intervention, I don't know. But he definitely played a huge part in helping me. I'm not sure what would have happened if I hadn't met him. I don't know if I would have gone back to drinking or whatnot, but he made it feel like I had a safe space to kind of go back into the world
Yeah.
and do
Yeah, he let
things.
you back in. So, did you have any slip ups after, or anything that happened after you got a little older? I mean, you're still really young. You're only in your early 20s. So, like, I mean, life is filled with alcohol, and especially the peer pressure that you encounter when you do just normal things at that age. I'm sure was really hard to kind of navigate.
Yeah, I didn't want to go out because I didn't want to tell people like, "Oh, I don't drink.
Yeah.
And it was hard too because he is what I call a normie, he can take it or leave it. And so he's still young, and he wants to go hang out with his friends and, that's fine. And I don't know if I would call them, I guess you could call them slip ups. It was, you know, it quickly, I just stopped drinking. And then I remember one time, gosh, it must have been like almost a decade later. I don't know. Like I didn't have alcohol. I could not have alcohol around me in my house, anything for years. And to this day, like my husband will maybe get a 6-pack of beer and it'll last him like a month or two. It's crazy to me. And I don't like beer, so it's never, but for a very long time, there was never alcohol around me.
Yeah.
But I
I think
remember
that's an
one time,
important point that for people who are listening and trying to get sober, just making sure that you dump all the bottles, don't have it
yes,
in the house. That was key for me in my recovery. When I woke up, my wife was an angel. She we alcohol does not stay in our place anymore. We don't even see it. It's no longer a problem anymore. If I see it, it's no big deal anymore. But those initial couple months of sobriety is so important to make sure that it's not even around in your line of sight, because it's just it's just a trigger that you don't want to even press, right?
Yeah. Well, and now because of COVID, at least here they'll deliver it to your house, which is just crazy to me. I can't imagine what that's like for people. But I was at my brother's house and it was the holidays and everybody in my family still drank, and I remember we had these little cordial glasses with like some dessert liqueur or something. Don't you want one, Jess? Don't you want one? It's just, and I was like, okay, yeah, whatever. It's probably 10 years later. And I'm sitting there and everybody's got theirs. And I literally took it like a shot. And then I look over and everybody else is like 3/4 of the way, still full. And I went, see, you can't drink. It like reinforced it even a decade later. Like, you cannot drink. Look what you just downed this thing and everybody else is still sipping on it. Like it just reinforced it. And that was like the last time that I remember thinking like that just can't happen. And I felt safe in that space because I had my, partner with me that had been there to help me. But between that time, when I was 27, my father died from liver cancer from drinking.
Wow, I'm so sorry.
So thank you. And so I had seen what it could do. And I used that as my like reasoning to not drink it in front of people for a long time. I'd be like, oh, I just don't drink because my dad died from drinking, and the reality was nobody knew, like I also had a problem too.
Yeah. When your father died of was it cirrhosis?
He had cirrhosis, but he had stage 4 liver cancer as well from the drinking.
So that obviously played a huge part in your staying sober and, not even letting it into your life again after that, those younger years of your life, right? So tell me a little bit more about, your journey is actually very, very interesting. The fact that you noticed that there was a problem early on. You said, okay, I'm going to barricade myself from alcohol completely. You had a very supportive partner. Then what happened? Explain to me the rest of the journey that you've been on.
Yeah. So at the time, like I said, my dad was my excuse to people. And then I realized that I was maybe even unknowingly, but surrounding myself with people that didn't drink all that much, or maybe didn't have a problem with it. And so once it was established that I didn't drink, it was never an issue. Right. And people just knew that. And since my father died, I've lost an aunt and an uncle, both to alcoholism. So
wow, it's very prevalent in your
on both
family.
sides. So it was my father and his sister. His sister has cirrhosis, and then my mom's brother fell and hit his head and passed away that way from drinking. And so it just kept replaying and reiterating in my life how much this disease can take from people and how poisonous alcohol is. It kept repeating itself in my life. And I just still say to this day, like, I'm a drink away from a totally different life. I'm not ever, going to say that it's never again, but at least that's what I hope for. Because I know where it's going to take me. I've seen it firsthand.
Yeah. Isn't it fascinating that for some reason, if you were to tell that story, right, the one you just told me with your family members, like especially the one that hit his head and fell and died that way, and just tragic. I'm so sorry. But if you were to say that about any other food, like if you said, oh, don't eat peanut butter because peanut butter will make you fall and die, like people would stop eating peanut butter altogether. Right? But for some reason, alcohol, for whatever reason, it's still the most popular drug, the most accessible drug. It's everywhere. It's the first thing that you get offered when you go out in social setting. I just wonder from your point of view, like, why do you think that is? Why do you think alcohol is such a big draw and it's almost taboo to say otherwise?
I feel like it is our society, and it is us wanting to numb out from a society and a culture that is not conducive to being healthy emotionally, specifically emotionally, but also physically as well. I mean, I don't think you can separate the two. Looking at myself and also watching others and having clients, this may be somewhat controversial, but I feel like the easiest part in sobriety is like putting down the alcohol.
Yeah, totally.
The hardest part is learning how to live your life sober. It was for me. I've seen it again and again and again. And I think when you look at the bigger picture, society doesn't know how to live sober. We don't know how to deal with feelings. We don't know how to sit in angst and pain, how to sit with uncomfortableness, right? We don't know how to interact with one another on a vulnerable level. And alcohol provides all of these kind of, crutches to help us be who maybe we want to be or say the things that we want to say that we normally wouldn't. It's like, and it's an acceptable thing in our society. I mean, I know like I have most of my family grew up on the East Coast and back, when my parents grew up, I mean, 5 o'clock was drink time. And if you didn't have the type of alcohol that your guest was coming over to have, then you were, it's rude, right?
Yeah, it's rude. Yeah.
It's rude. And so I think, we look at it as a celebratory thing too. It's not, here we have like this Shamrock Run in March, right? And everybody runs and then has a beer afterwards. Like if you really stop to think about it, it makes zero sense. Or people wanting to have organic wine as though it's better. I mean, and I've heard all the stories, I mean, I had family members that say, well, I drink vodka because it's clear, it's better for you. I mean, we can make up all these stories. And another truth is that it's an industry that makes a crap ton of money.
Yeah.
Yep. They endorse all sorts of things. What happens when, you just had like the World Series? What do? They go in the locker room and they drink and get
And they
wasted
spray
and spray
alcohol,
champagne.
all over each other. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's we use it as a numbing agent for really tough times, and then we also use it for an enhancing agent for weddings, parties, Christmas parties, you name it, whatever you see right away, right? So this is a nice little segue. So you became a recovery coach. Can you explain what sparked that? I mean, I can assume what many things that probably sparked that, but what in your own words, like what was that? What was that journey like? Where did that begin?
Yeah. For the longest time, like I said, I didn't ever consider myself sober. I just didn't drink. That was my thing. I'm not sober.
Yeah.
I just don't drink. I don't drink because my dad died and my aunt, my uncle, I had all these things. And so I was never, spoke out loud or whatever about my recovery. And it was actually, right when COVID hit. I was on Instagram and there was a woman that I followed and they were looking for people to tell stories about addiction, whether it was somebody in their life that was addicted, if they had a problem, whatever. And it was going to be a compilation, this book that was going to be written called The Addiction Diaries. And it was people's different stories about addiction. And it said, apply here if you want. And I always have wanted to be a writer. And I was like, I mean, we're like it's June, everything's shut down. It was late. It was like 11 at night. I was probably half asleep and I was like, that sounds like something I'm going to write about my dad. So I submitted it and I got accepted. And so that was like the first time that I had ever spoken out loud about any of it. And the book launched in September of 2020. And like I said, it kind of just opened the door a little bit for me to talk about it. But it still wasn't that I was sober. It was just about my dad at the time. And then I got to meet a couple other people in the sober community through that. And I'll never forget, one of my great friends, she and I were talking and I said, I'd love to be able to help people, but I don't know what I have to offer. And she said, you have long-term sobriety. What are you talking about? And I was like, what do you mean? No one's going to listen to someone who quit before it was legal to drink. And she said, well, I beg to differ. I think that, you do have a story to tell. And that kind of lit a fire under me. And then I sat on it for a while. And I thought, well, I don't know if I want to, tell my story. And there was still the shame behind it all,
Mhm.
even all the years later. And also for the longest time, I wanted to not be a part of that community, right? It was like
Right.
something about like it was too close to home for I lost family members. I just wanted to move on with my life. And somewhere along the line, about a couple years ago, I was talking to my husband and I was like, I heard about this place that I could go and get my professional recovery coaching license. And I said, I have to do something to help break the cycle of addiction and trauma. I have to. I can't just sit here. I'm doing it with my kids, but that's not enough. I
Mm.
have to help people. And at that time, I had lost two other friends to addiction. And so it was like, I just was like, you know, have to. And, my husband was like, well, he was very supportive either way. And one night, it was, I think right around Christmas, I just pressed the purchase button. I'm like, I'm doing it. I'm just going to do it. And so I did. And I fell in love with the process of helping others, feeling like I actually have my pain has a purpose, right?
Mhm.
And so in July of 2023 is when I opened my doors for my business. And this is where I'm supposed to be. I couldn't imagine doing something different.
That's fantastic. What a way to find your calling, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I can kind of relate. I mean, I'm starting this channel. I drank myself to a liver transplant. I mean, who does that at 36, right? Uh,
Yeah.
so once you got into coaching, if you could, can you share maybe some tips or tricks or I don't know, anything that you have noticed in your coaching that you found has worked really well with your clients?
I have found that there is a real good balance between say it how it is. So I'm super honest and I expect them to be really honest with me too. Like if what I say
Hmm.
they disagree with or it's not working. And also empathy and holding space for them to learn to have empathy for themselves.
Mm.
The one thing that I've come across time and time again is it doesn't matter if they're starting on day one with me. I've actually had clients that are like, I need help getting sober. So we actually plan a day to stop. I've had
What is that? What
clients.
is that day like? What is that day like? That must be varies from each person to each person, but I can only imagine it being really uncomfortable for maybe not you, but for them definitely. And you maybe, I don't know. I'm picking a day and saying, okay, this is the sober day that we're doing. What does that day look like? I'm curious. Like, what is this?
Yeah, so that doesn't happen often, but it does. And I want to say that with a caveat that these are not people that are like heavy, heavy drinkers. By no means should you actually stop drinking without medical
Right.
attention.
Yeah.
I mean, and I'll even tell before this happens, they see their doctor. There's a lot of communication going on. It is not cold turkey. I don't ever advise that for people. You can actually kill yourself doing that.
You're right.
It's funny. One client was like, "Oh, I'll just do it on Monday." Okay, what's the most stressful day of the week for you? Monday. Well, why would you quit on a Monday?
Hmm.
So it's things like that, like figuring out, and this is not someone who had been drinking a lot as far as volume. It was just a habit that was getting in the way that they wanted to quit, right? But so I do weekly, hourly sessions with my clients, but they have access to me all week long in between sessions because I'm a firm believer that alcohol and addiction don't just occur within an hour of a time per week, right? You're not just going to meet with me for that hour and then not have a trigger all week or not. It just doesn't work like that.
Yeah.
So they have full access to me, except when I'm sleeping, basically, to help them navigate those early days and navigate through that. So we set up a time and a plan, and all I ask of them is like transparency and honesty, right? If it didn't work
Hmm.
that day, it didn't work that day. I've had clients that we've decided, you need to go to detox first. I'll be there, virtually holding your hand, but it's not safe for you to detox at home. Or maybe you need extra help. So I coordinate and help them coordinate that, right? And just kind of be in their corner like my husband was for me. And
Hmm.
let them know that they're not alone. And then they go to detox and they're talking to me all through detox, right? And they may do an intensive outpatient program, but still have me as their coach because there's so many different modalities, and I'm very much into the holistic approach to helping someone quit drinking. The biggest thing that I've noticed, though, is no matter what, if they're 30 days sober or 2 years sober, the same theme is, I don't know how to live sober. Help me. I
And
don't know.
that varies from person to person, right? I mean, everyone has their thing that they're into, so you need to find that thing that they're into in a healthy way, right? You don't want them to have to escape back to drinking. How does that work? Like, tell me a story that you've can share with us that uh, you saw someone maybe who was struggling, mightily, like I was. Um, can you tell us like a success story that you've come across?
Sure. Well, I proudly say this, but it's not my doing, it's my clients' doing, that so far everyone I've worked with has remained sober. So I'm
Wow,
very proud of them because
that's
it's their work.
great. Yeah.
But, there's several success stories. One I will say is a person that went into an detox, came out. And the biggest thing when I'm working with a client is to make a plan. So we have to have a plan and we have to have a schedule, right? Because our brains really like to know what's going to happen. So if we have a routine that we can build into however that works for the client, because everybody's individual. And when I work with you, I'm not working with you to tell you what to do. I'm working with you to help you come up with what's going to work for you. And then I help support you in how you go about doing that. So whether that's, you get up first thing in the morning, I always say, implement exercise in you make sure you're getting enough protein, electrolytes, all eating healthy. Like, it's a whole lifestyle change. It is not
Hmm.
just removing the alcohol. And it's not about white knuckling it. It's about thriving in it. And in the beginning, most of your resources are going to just keeping away from the alcohol, right? But
Hmm.
as you go along, I've had people, I have someone that's been an amazing success story, and they are a little over a year sober. And they came to me about 6 months in and said, I've never been sober my entire adult life. I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to deal. And since then, they've gone through a death of a loved one. They've gone through a couple moves, job changes, big life events, and learning how to do that sober. And for me, that's all about holding space for emotions that to me, emotions are not bad or good. We label them bad or good.
Yeah.
They're just emotions, right? And how do you hold space for those uncomfortable feelings? Because ultimately, that's what we're doing when we go to reach for the alcohol. Sometimes we reach because we're happy, sure, but a lot of times it's uncomfortable. We don't want to feel uncomfortable. So learning how to hold space for that, and for me, I always say, I will believe in you until you can believe in yourself. That's my job. My job is to support you until you feel like you can support yourself. But the success, I think, lies in the everyday commitment that these people bring to the table to want to not just be sober, but to heal and to really live a life of joy. I have a non-negotiable with everybody that I work with, and that is every day you have to do something that brings you joy. It can be 5 minutes, it can be an hour, whatever it is. And it can be anything
Hmm.
that's healthy, but that brings you joy. Because part of what's missing in their life is joy. We've messed up so much with, different hormones in our system and dopamine levels and all of that stuff. So like bringing joy back and being in the present moment. And that seems to be really helpful. We kind of build a sober toolbox kit, and that's individualized to each person. So they have multiple modalities to reach for when they're struggling. And then also that they implement joy into their life again, however that may look.
Yeah, I wonder, because I'm thinking back on when I was trying to get sober before I just drank myself to death. Uh, what do you say to someone who's like, I don't have any joy. I'm pretty much lost. I don't, nothing, because that's how I felt. I felt like there was no joy in my life. I mean, obviously my wife she's my guardian angel. She was the only source of joy. It felt like, honestly. But yeah, for those people who don't even have any support system or any joy in their life, like, where do you begin in that process of exploration?
So I think it's always important to know, as a certified professional coach, but also in any area, a line of work, is to know where your boundaries are. So if someone appears to be like clinically depressed or have things that are beyond my scope of practice, I always refer out. Sometimes when people quit drinking, maybe they had health problems, but they were blaming it all on being hungover, and they actually have a physical health problem. So one of the things I always start out with is like, you need to go see, your regular doc, get blood work done. Let's see where we're at. Make sure there's nothing, physically going on, or maybe if there is, let's address it.
Mm-hmm.
If someone seems really down and super depressed, like obviously therapist or somebody, psychologist, somebody that is trained more in that area. But I also tell people, not everybody gets what they call this pink cloud. I don't know if you've heard of it, like where you quit drinking and you're just kind of the euphoric feeling. And I don't think it's as common as maybe it's used. And I let people know, like, it's okay to feel like crap for a while. Like,
Yeah.
it's okay.
Yeah. It's
And
actually almost kind of expected,
it
like,
is.
yeah, because
It
those first initial months of sobriety suck. I mean, I suffered so badly during those 125 days I did. I talk about this all the time. People are gonna be like, stop talking about it over and over. But I did. I mean, it was so difficult. I had no support, and it was so boring, and I was so depressed. I every ounce of part of my being was just, just grab alcohol, get it, you'll feel better, you'll feel better. Because I had joyless, pretty
is.
much. That's how I felt. So, what's the name of your book? I'm curious about
Well, I'm in a book, and a chapter of it's called The Addiction Diaries.
the addiction diaries.
And yeah, and it was a great thing to be a part of. It's funny to look now and see like what I wrote then versus what I would maybe write now, is because we're all growing.
Yes.
So yeah, it was fun. I hope to write my own memoir. That's kind of been something I've been doing on the side.
Cool.
Yeah, I'm just super passionate about, breaking the cycle, but it's more than just putting down the booze, right? And putting down the drugs. It's really living authentically with a purpose and joy, and feeling all the feelings that we don't want to feel. Like a lot of my clients, they say, oh, I feel like crap. When am I going to feel better? And I tell them it's okay to feel like crap.
Mm-hmm.
It's okay. You can
Do
sit with
you?
it. It will
Yeah.
get better.
Yeah. Do you find that since you've gotten into this job, this profession, do you find that there's more of a vulnerability or more of an openness that people are expressing a need for help nowadays? Because I mean, when I was growing up, asking for help, that was you just did not do that. I mean, this channel wouldn't exist. Like, none of these things would have existed back in 2000 and whatever 10 when I was when it really started to get bad. Yeah, I wonder, like, have you noticed like an uptick in people reaching out to you saying, "Hey, Jess, like, I really could use some help."
Yeah, I definitely have noticed, my business is still young, a little over a year that I've been doing it. I definitely see an uptick. The thing that I'm seeing more and more, which is what brought me to go back to school, is people wanting to know, especially long-term sobriety. So we're talking a year plus, coming to me and wanting to know, how did I get here? How did I get here? I really, whether they want to face their traumas or just recognize, like, a lot of people, with addiction have traumatic backgrounds, not everybody, but, and trauma is also relative, right?
Mm-hmm.
Everybody experiences some level, but wanting to really understand how they got to where they are, and then basically learning how to find themselves again. There is a huge differentiation I can tell between those people. You can have two people that get sober, and you can have one person that's kind of a dry drunk that doesn't do the work. Yeah, they put down the liquor, but they haven't done any work as far as healing themselves or recognizing even that they had an issue, versus someone who's like, I want to really live my life, in a
Mm-hmm.
forward motion. And the growth that you see in those people are just tremendous. And I think
Yeah.
there's more and more of that, of like, hey, kind of my specialty area seems to be, I have people come to me and say, okay, I've been sober for a year, 2 years, 3 years, but I don't know who I am.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how do I get through life sober? How do I get through a death of a loved one sober? How do I get through a job change, a loss of a marriage? All of these things that happen in life. How do I do it sober?
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I've seen more and more coming to my practice.
Yeah, that's how it was for me too. I when I got sober, when I did those 125 days, I didn't have, I didn't know how to live life sober. Because every part of everything in my life revolved around alcohol. It was either waiting to get drunk or waiting to have that drink, or when I was in the process of drinking, it was how much can I drink, and then life just happened around it, just, it's just swirling around my life. And I honestly felt like I didn't live for 10 years. That's how I felt. Like, I feel like I felt like I did not live for 10 years because alcohol was all encompassing, and it creeped into every area of my life, and it just completely took control of everything for me. So there was no evolving, there was no getting better. There was only the inevitable, which was death.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I've seen it firsthand. I've held the hand of family members. I know what it looks like, and I tell people, like, it's not pretty. It's not a pretty way to go, and what it does to those that are still left behind. And it's a disease, and I let my clients know, if you were a diabetic and you were told you had to have insulin to stay alive, right? In the beginning, a lot of your effort's going to go to making sure you have your insulin and making sure you do these things that's going to help keep you alive, right? And you said a lot of your focus and energy is going to go to that. Over time, it's just going to be who you are, right? And it integrates itself into who you are. With alcoholism, it's a disease as well. So in the beginning, you're right. It's going to suck. It's going to take up a lot of your mental time and your physical time because your body's recuperating. You're going to be bored, all because your dopamine levels haven't readjusted. Like, there's all these things going on in the background, right?
Yeah.
And you're putting all this energy into just not picking up the bottle. But over time, as you probably know, it becomes who you are. It integrates into who you are. So there's less and less space taking up working on just being sober. Yes, you still have to be diligent. You still have to watch yourself and monitor yourself. Absolutely. We're all a step away from, going in the wrong direction. But the most important thing is to know that, like, I think people have an expectation sometimes too, that, like, I'll stop drinking and everything will be fine.
Right.
And, like, it's
And
not.
that's never the case.
It's not.
No.
And that doesn't mean don't do it. That doesn't mean don't do it, because it is so much better on the other side, but you have to go through everything to get to the other side. And I think
Yes.
everybody wants a shortcut,
Everyone wants quick results. Yeah.
Yeah.
But anything worthwhile in life, it takes time and effort. Yeah, I felt the same way. Just thought, I'll go sober. And I remember distinctly, my wife and I, we went on this like mini vacation when I was doing those 125 days sober, and we fought the whole time. We fought that whole weekend. And I remember thinking, okay, this sucks. Like, I'm sober. I did the thing, and I'm just, my life was still, it wasn't her fault that we were fighting, it was because of my life up until that point. I was doing all the wrong things. And just because I got sober, it wasn't like miraculously my life was going to all of a sudden do a 180, and all of a sudden I have money in my bank account and I have a job that I can go to and love, right? That's not how it works. All your problems will still be there in the morning, morning after you get sober. That's when the real work go up. You can start doing the real work, because now you're clear-minded and you're sitting with your feelings, and you're in those feelings are uncomfortable. So what do you do with people who get sober and now they have to address these kind of things, and then they're finding out that there's a lot going on there? That must be tough on your end, right?
I try and be there for them how I wish I would have. I mean, I had my husband, but like how other people I wish would have maybe shown up for me.
Yeah.
A lot of it is self-compassion, and learning to love yourself. That is something that you learn. You don't just come by, right? All of these things you have to learn, and you have to take little baby steps each and every day to go to that direction. Well, healing is not a linear straight line, as you know, trajectory. It's not, you quit alcohol, boom. It's like life still does life, right? And so if the overall picture is that we're making progress, then that's what we're looking at. I also, I grew up in a family where, like, the one emotion that was allowed, especially from my father, was happy. The one feeling that you could have was to be happy. That was it. Nothing else. Can't have anything else. And so I was always chasing happy. I was chasing it. Like, why don't I feel happy? There must be something wrong with me. If I drink, in the beginning, I'm chasing that happy feeling, right? So with clients, I just let them know, like, You can have two totally different thoughts or feelings and hold them at the same time with the same space. You can be angry, let's say, at your parents for not giving you what you needed when you were a child that maybe led you into the direction that you went to. And you can also have forgiveness and empathy that they didn't know any better at the time, that they were only giving what they were able to give. Like, I think holding two different feelings at the same time is so important. And we always think we have to be this or that. It's black or white. And also not assigning feelings as good or bad, but just as what they are, And I tell people, like, feelings, it's like, it's a ticker. If you imagine like just feelings going past you, right? And all day long, we have different feelings. It's when we grab onto one of them and we hold them so tight that it's like can take us down, good or bad, right? It's like, allow it to just be there. There are days, and I used to never know how to do this. I was sober for 15 years probably, or maybe even longer, 20 years before I really learned how to be sober and okay with my emotions. I would still try and find different ways to, like, obviously not drinking or doing drugs, but to distract myself. And now it's like, if I have a really crappy day or crappy time, it's like, okay, it is what it is.
Yeah.
It's here. It probably won't be here tomorrow. And if it is, it probably won't be here the day after that. And if it is, I'll figure it out. I'll just let myself be. I don't have to psychoanalyze it. I don't have to fix it. I can just be, because part of the human experience is that 50% of your life is great and 50% sucks.
Mm-hmm.
That's life, right? We wouldn't know the great if we didn't have the sucky part.
Exactly. Yep.
So a lot of it, I think, is just acceptance, and also relearning that maybe things that we were taught or embedded into us as a child is not necessarily the truth. And having a lot of self-compassion and being okay with life sucking sometimes. Like, just teaching, I think that's the biggest thing, is I tell my clients, like, it's okay. And also, I am there for them every day once they sign up with me. It's not every week, it's every day. They can get in contact with me. We can work it out. We can talk about it. And I think just knowing that they have me in their back pocket, I think is helpful, that I'm not going to let them down like maybe others have. I will be there. I'll hold your hand through it all. We will get through it. And a lot of times it's a mindset shift that needs to happen. Or going for a walk, moving the emotions out of your body. I mean, there's all different types of modalities that can help. But the simplest of things.
On some of those? Yeah. Can you speak on some of those? I know moving is huge. The diet, huge, right? What else have you noticed that has worked with some of your clients that, I don't want to take too much of your time. I know.
No, you're fine.
You're very valuable. Is there anything else that maybe is a little unorthodox, or maybe something that you've picked up on through your clients' successes that has really worked, that maybe goes against what common knowledge might be?
Depends on the client. So I will say that I have complex PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. I was finally diagnosed after years of being told I just had generalized anxiety. And this is another thing I'm very passionate about. People that have a generalized anxiety, it comes out of nowhere. They don't know why. Maybe they're having panic attacks. It's like just random. Like, it happened to one of my close friends. Getting cognitive behavioral therapy, they call it CBT therapy, which is the general line of therapy when you go see a therapist, is very helpful in that situation. And you go and you maybe go for 6 months, you learn different modalities, breathing techniques, meditation, things to help calm your body, and you learn them and then you apply them and you go on with your life. People like myself, that is actually what had kept me in the anxiety loop. Because when you have post-traumatic stress disorder or complex post-traumatic stress disorder, talking about your traumas actually re-traumatizes you. So going to talk therapy, which is cognitive behavioral therapy, right, is known as talk therapy, actually re-traumatizes you every time you do it, because you're bringing it all up. Trauma lives and is stored within our body, not our brain. So we can't rationally talk our way out of the trauma. We can't process it by talking about it. And I spent years doing that. And I could not figure out what was wrong with me, that I keep going from therapist to therapist and trying all these things and nothing's truly working. Like, I'm living, but I'm surviving. I'm not thriving. Until I finally found, the right therapist who did EMDR, which is...
It's crazy. I was just going to, sorry, I had to cut you off on that one, because
no, you're fine.
I was doing the same thing. I was going from to therapist, and not getting any kind of results because one, I was an alcoholic and I was not being truthful to myself and to the therapist that I was seeing at the time. But yeah, one that I'm seeing now, and I've been seeing since actually before my liver transplant. He's fantastic, and he said, "Well, there's this new, not new, but relatively new, I guess, EMDR, which is, they do some like tapping as you're kind of going back to that memory and trying to like relocate the feeling is and things like that." And I did that. This is into my sobriety. My father, unfortunately, just passed away a couple months ago, and
I'm
I
sorry to
was
hear
I
that.
was really yeah, it was shocking. I was there. I was the one that found him dead, and
Oh,
so and this is I'm brand new to being sober, so I was in a full out panic and obviously very worried that I would use again. But we did that EMDR therapy, and I can't stress enough how important that day, or actually it was three sessions that we did of it, in helping me heal that trauma that I just experienced. It was very beneficial. Like, it was unbelievably helpful in helping me cope with that experience and move on in a very healthy way.
mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, EMDR is it saved me. It made me feel whole again, and I'm dealing with, and I'm that's so great. First of all, that you were able to tap into that right away, because the longer the trauma stays in our body unprocessed, the more damage it
Yes.
does, right?
Hmm.
So ideally, if we could get someone like in your shoes that had just experienced something very traumatic and be able to process it right then and there, you're saving a lot of disaster and things kind of going on, even on a physiological level, right?
Hmm.
Uh, and so, I had been stuffing stuff for 20, 30 years, and EMDR really, really helped me. And I'm really passionate about, you have to be able to differentiate when you're working with people where they're at. Where is the anxiety coming from? Where are things coming from? Because you can do more harm. And the other thing I've seen, unfortunately, and I'm not against therapists at all, because cognitive behavioral therapy is needed. Absolutely. Definitely works. Um, what I get concerned about is when I have like clients that come to me and they're maybe a month sober and someone's wanting to do like trauma work, like EMDR therapy on them.
Yeah.
And in your situation, like, that was a correct thing, but not for everybody. A lot of people need to be sober a lot longer before they dive into traumas of the past, and it just kind of depends. But yeah, I think what I was going to go back to with modalities is a lot of times you hear people talk about meditation, yoga, things like that. People like myself that have complex PTSD, those things are very challenging, and actually, like, I can't do them. I cannot meditate. I Yoga makes me anxious when it should be calming. And it's very common, actually. And you'll see that with people that have that, because the whole idea of trauma is you don't feel safe within your body. And so to
Hmm.
slow it down to that point, it actually is reactivating. It's very weird. But I do see that in the sober community a lot, where people are like, meditate and go to yoga and do all these kind of relaxation techniques. And for some people, they are fantastic. And I am not by any means saying that you shouldn't do it. Absolutely. Like, if it works for you, do it. But I also give my clients permission that if it doesn't work, don't do it.
Hmm.
Do what works for
What
you.
works for you? Yeah,
Do
I'm
what
actually
works for you.
I'm very similar. I struggle mightily with meditation. I know the benefits of it, and I don't know if it's just my personality, how I'm wired, but when I sit in my own thoughts, it can get dark pretty quickly. Uh,
Yeah.
yeah, and my thoughts will start spiraling out of control, and sometimes I can't get back to homeostasis. Right, I
Yeah.
can't back to ground zero. So that is a key thing I think you just mentioned. Eh, there isn't one cure all for sobriety or a healthy, well balanced life, right? Everyone navigating this world differently, and we all need to be open to what does work for us and what doesn't, and take the things that do work and discard the rest.
Yeah. Yeah. I tell people, like, one thing I know for sure is, like, if you have a strong emotion like anger or frustration or whatever, emotions hold energy. And so, like, walking is huge.
Mm-hmm.
Lifting weights, lifting heavy weights, all of those things are really, really helpful. You have to discharge those powerful emotions somehow, right? Because we're so used to stuffing them, stuff them, stuff them, stuff them, and drink them, drink them, drink them. Well, you got to get rid of it somehow. You can't keep stuffing it, because you keep stuffing it even as you're sober. it's going to lead to not great things, right? We have to keep it moving. But everybody looks different on what they do. And I'm like, it doesn't matter what you do. That's where we go back to finding that joy every day in your life. And it's different for everyone. But that's what I really focus on, because joy is actually anecdotal to addiction. Like we have to find what makes us happy and what relieves our stress. Sometimes I have a mother and it was like she was missing out on her kids because she was, drinking every night to oblivion, right? So now what's the one thing that centers her is sometimes when she gets really anxious, I'm like, hey, why don't you go see what your kids are doing? Read a book with them, get on the floor, play with them. And it's like, that's her thing that just calms her right down and recenters her.
Yep.
Somebody else might be like, oh, my kids are stressful. That's not going to help me. I need to go for a walk by myself, right? So everybody's different.
Yeah. And everyone has a thing, and everyone does have a thing. They just, whether they know it or not, or they haven't come to that realization yet, right, of what that thing is. And that's why your job is so important, because you actually them find that thing within them that will help alleviate this anxiety-ridden emotions that they're dealing with.
Yeah.
So that's key. So I don't want to take too much of your time, Jess. Where can people find you?
Yeah, so I have, I'm on Instagram at My Sober Sunrise. You can find me there. And also I have mysobersunrise.com website. Either way there, contact me. The easiest way is just to send me a direct message on Instagram. But if you're not on social media, you can definitely go to my website and contact me. And yeah, we go from there. I offer a half an hour free discovery call, Zoom call, one-on-one. So you can see if I'm a good fit for you. Maybe if you have questions about what coaching is actually like, what it looks like. Things like that I offer to everyone, and then go from there.
That's great. Well, thank you so much, Jess. You gave us a ton of information, very helpful information, and I hope everyone out there listening and watching got as much out of it as I did, because it was super, super, super helpful, and I am very, very grateful to you for coming on the show. I really do appreciate it.
Well, thank you for having me. It's been great.
Okay, great. Thank you. All right, everybody. Well, thank you again for watching the Willpower podcast, and look out for new episodes coming soon. Have a great day, everybody.